Ever wondered how Argentina, once one of the world's wealthiest countries, has become synonymous with rampant inflation? Let's delve into its economic history. At the heart of Argentina's economic woes lies a tale of mismanagement spanning several decades. Excessive government intervention, a constant feature of the country's economic landscape, has often stifled private sector growth and innovation. Fiscal irresponsibility, another recurring theme, has resulted in chronic budget deficits and ballooning public debt. And then there's the failure to adapt to global economic trends. While the world embraced globalization, Argentina often chose a path of economic isolationism, missing out on opportunities for international trade and investment. These poor policy decisions have undermined Argentina's economic resilience, leading to a cycle of instability and crises. This cycle of economic instability and crises didn't happen overnight. It's a result of decades of consistent economic mismanagement. A significant part of Argentina's economic trajectory can be traced back to the era of Juan Domingo Perón. This charismatic leader first assumed power in 1946, and his reign marked a significant shift in Argentina's economic policies. Perón's approach was characterized by economic isolationism and a strong emphasis on populism. The goal was to address social inequalities and bolster industrialization. However, this approach had unintended consequences. Perón's policies fostered an environment of heavy government intervention, protectionism, and overspending. These measures, designed to bring immediate relief and foster domestic growth, ended up contributing to long-term economic stagnation. The country's economy became less competitive, less resilient, and more prone to crises. The effects of Perón's era are not limited to history books or old newspaper clippings. They have left a lasting imprint on Argentina's economic fabric. The influence of Perón's economic policies continues to be felt in Argentina's economic landscape today, shaping the country's response to economic challenges and opportunities. Peronism, the political ideology of Juan Domingo Perón, continues to dictate the economic direction of Argentina. This enduring political doctrine, characterized by heavy government intervention and populist measures, has remained a dominant force in the nation's political landscape. Its influence is so pervasive that it has significantly hindered Argentina's ability to adapt to the ever-evolving global economic trends. Furthermore, despite the clear need for modernization and market-oriented reforms, successive governments have found it challenging to break free from the grip of Peronism. This reluctance or inability to alter course has resulted in a failure to embrace globalization effectively, impairing Argentina's capacity to compete internationally and attract vital investments. In effect, Peronist administrations have often prioritized short-term political gains, sidelining the necessity for long-term economic stability. The inability to break away from Peronist policies has only amplified Argentina's economic challenges. Argentina's fiscal deficit isn't a new problem. It's a systemic issue that's been dragging on for over a decade. The fiscal deficit is essentially a gap where government spending consistently surpasses its revenue. This imbalance is driven by high levels of public expenditure, often on social programs, and a lack of adequate revenue generation. The government, in a bid to keep the economy afloat, has had to resort to deficit financing. It's like using a credit card to pay off another credit card. It's a band-aid solution, not a cure. This approach involves borrowing and money printing to cover the shortfall, but it brings with it a slew of other problems. It fuels inflationary pressures, erodes public confidence in the economy, and generates a cycle of instability that's hard to break. The persistent fiscal deficit is a telltale sign of an economy in distress. When a government turns to its central bank for financing, it's a red flag, and in Argentina, it's become a norm. The government's increasing reliance on the central bank to finance spending through money printing has become a significant contributor to the country's economic woes. This practice, known as monetizing deficits, is essentially the government's way of funding its programs. But it's a quick fix that only leads to more problems down the line. As more money is printed, inflation spirals out of control, eroding the value of the Argentine peso. Suddenly, the money in your pocket isn't worth as much as it used to be. Prices go up, but your salary doesn't keep pace. This is the reality for many Argentinians, as their purchasing power dwindles and economic hardship becomes a daily struggle. This vicious cycle of currency depreciation and rising prices is a direct consequence of the government's dependence on central bank financing. Repeatedly defaulting on sovereign debt obligations isn't just bad for a country's reputation, it's disastrous for its economy. Argentina's past is tarnished with such defaults, each one a blow to the nation's credibility in international financial markets. This history has not been kind to Argentina, resulting in an erosion of investor confidence, which in turn has escalated its borrowing costs. This unfortunate cycle has strained the nation's finances further, making it increasingly difficult for Argentina to secure affordable credit on the global stage. But the repercussions don't end there. With limited access to external financing, Argentina is pushed into a corner, forced to rely on domestic sources of funding. And the most common method? Printing money. This practice, however, only fans the flames of inflation, leading to increased economic instability. Argentina's inability to access affordable credit is a self-inflicted wound, further exacerbating its economic woes. Trade restrictions and currency manipulation, two strategies that have only deepened Argentina's economic troubles. Argentina's approach to trade and currency has been a complex dance of restrictions and manipulations, a dance that has unfortunately led the nation into a pit of economic distortion. Let's break down how this has happened. Trade restrictions, such as high export taxes, have been a common tool in Argentina's economic toolbox. The intention behind these restrictions is to control the flow of goods, to protect domestic industries, and to try to balance the trade books. But the reality is more complicated. These restrictions have often resulted in stifling the growth of local industries by reducing their access to international markets. Moreover, they have created an environment of unpredictability that deters foreign investors and hampers the country's competitiveness on a global scale. Now, let's turn to currency manipulation. The Argentine government has frequently intervened in currency markets, again with the intention of protecting the economy. The idea is to maintain a stable and competitive exchange rate to boost exports. However, these interventions have often led to the opposite effect. Persistent attempts to control the exchange rate have resulted in an overvalued currency, which makes exports more expensive and less competitive. Additionally, currency manipulation has contributed to inflation. When the government prints money to finance its spending, it increases the supply of money, which can lead to inflation if the economy cannot absorb this extra liquidity. Inflation, in turn, erodes the purchasing power of the average citizen, leading to economic hardship and social inequality. The combination of trade restrictions and currency manipulation has thus created a vicious cycle of economic instability. These strategies, though aimed at protecting the economy, have instead created distortions that have exacerbated inflation, undermined competitiveness, and deterred foreign investment. In the end, these measures, intended to protect the economy, have only served to weaken it further. So, what have we learned about Argentina's inflation problem? From the roots of economic mismanagement in the era of Juan Domingo Perón, who ushered in a period of heavy government intervention and protectionism, Argentina's economy has been caught in a perpetual cycle of instability. Perón's legacy, which is deeply imbued in the nation's politics, has continued to perpetuate policies that prioritize short-term gains over long-term stability. This legacy has also contributed to a persistent fiscal deficit, with government spending consistently outpacing revenues. Further compounding the issue is the reliance on central bank financing and the dangerous practice of printing money to cover expenses, which has only served to stoke the flames of inflation. The nation's history of defaulting on debt and its complex system of trade restrictions and currency manipulation have also played a significant role, eroding international investor confidence and undermining competitiveness. Ultimately, Argentina's inflation problem isn't just a symptom of economic mismanagement. It's a stark reminder of the consequences of failing to adapt to changing global economic dynamics.